day to everybody, and welcome to Mondays with Marty. Again, quick reminder, every Monday from 12 to 12:30 Central Time, I'm going to be answering as many questions as I can related to job search. So I thank all of you for joining us today. Before I get into all of the specific questions, I'm just going to share with you a couple quick reminders. Okay, we're doing this today. Today is a bit of a special day for me because it's my birthday. And I'm spending it with all of you. This is the best thing I would want to do on my birthday. Celebration going to happen later tonight. A couple quick reminders. Membership to 𝗲𝘃𝗲𝗿, absolutely free. And with it, you're going to get access to our 9,500 members and 3 webinar recordings to me. Join our LinkedIn group. A lot of jobs being advertised on there. A lot of opportunities for you to share ideas and stories with other job seekers, and of course, the 2,500 plus members that have already landed. I've got a huge portfolio of webinar and workshop recordings, and they are all out there on the website, many different topics. Please take advantage of them. Here's a few of our upcoming events. Wednesday, May 11th, I'm going to be conducting a 3-hour workshop entirely online on how to create and implement an effective job search plan. And whether you've been in a search for 2 weeks to 2 years, you've got to have a plan to land, because too many people gravitate toward that shiny object, the online ad. Not a good use of your time. I'm going to go through 25 things that are absolutely essential to an effective plan and how to do them. Resumes, LinkedIn profile, networking, all kinds of writing aspects. On Thursday, May 26th, I'll be doing an hour-and-a-half webinar on how to build a resume that beats the applicant tracking system. 7 out of 10 resumes that get submitted to an online ad are never read. And I'm going to share with you 22 things that you need to make sure are in the separate version of your resume for the ATS so that you pass through the systems. And one item that I've overlooked here is going to be on Monday, May 9th. Be back here again from noon to 12:30 Central Time, Mondays with Marty. And if any of you feel like you need some outside help, I've got coaching packages as well as one-on-one customized services that are available to you at any point in time. So please take action, join the organization, become active in it, take advantage of the free webinars, the free iPod, the free podcasts, the free video interviews, and I've got a lot from different radio, TV stations, and podcasters, and check all the resources out on the website. So anything here is open game. I will take questions on any topics that you've got. So I urge you, don't be afraid to enter some questions into the chat. I have one simple request. Please write them in a very clear and concise way so that I can read them and understand them, and then, of course, share them. Any question you ask is going to be addressed anonymously. Nobody's name is being divulged here. So please, don't hesitate. If you've got a burning issue that you were wondering about and had never had an opportunity to ask it, now is the perfect time to do just that. So let's move on to the questions. And I've gotten quite a few people that have emailed me in advance. So I am going to, answer some of those, early on here. So I've got a real quick question that just got chatted in here. How do I locate a hiring manager if they are not identified in the listing? This is easy. If you know the name of the company, your chances of finding the hiring manager on LinkedIn are extremely high. You got to do a filtered search on LinkedIn. So let's say it's ABC Company. And just as an example, let's say you're looking for the VP of Finance. You can go into LinkedIn, click on the search bar, and hit the enter key on your keypad. Then you're going to tell LinkedIn in the drop-down menu, I'm looking for people. So select people. And then over to the right, you're going to see a button there called All Filters. Click on that. And then you're going to get an entire criteria-based choice of many different things that you can choose from. You can choose what company they're working for. And make sure you select current company as opposed to past company. Enter that company's name. And if you want to put in a city, you can. And down at the bottom, there's going to be an opportunity to plug in a title. You could plug in VP Finance if that's who you think is likely to be the individual that this position might report to. But you might also want to plug in some other people. you want to use a Boolean search technique. So let's say, for example, you were applying for a director of finance role. Down in the title, you could put VP Finance, space, capital OR, space, CFO for Chief Financial Officer, space, capital OR, space, you could put in VP Sales, VP Marketing, VP of Operations, because you want to find and get the attention of the right people inside the company. It doesn't have to be just one person, but this is how you find the hiring manager, the hiring manager's peers, and potentially their boss. And to me, this is a real quick exercise. It will not take you more than a couple minutes to find all the right people, and then you can email all of them. So while most of the jobs that are listed list an HR person or a talent recruiter, those aren't the people making decisions. And in fact, in most cases, if you're not looking for a job in HR, quite honestly, HR is the last place you want to go looking for jobs, because you want to get to the hiring manager, the people that are going to weigh in on that decision, right? So those are the people that own the budget, have the decision-making authority, and have the ability to influence a decision. And oftentimes it's not just one person, but that hiring manager obviously has the biggest vote. So please, while you may end up doing a phone screen, the people that are going to influence that phone screen are not in HR and talent acquisition, and it's not the applicant tracking system. You got to get to the people that really matter, and you can find them all on LinkedIn. And that's what's great about the platform. Here's another question that came in. What's the most important part from a job posting that must be addressed in the cover letter? Right? And I'm glad that the question about the cover letter was asked here, and asked early, because I am a huge believer in cover letters. And probably some of you have heard me say, resumes tell, but cover letters sell. Because a cover letter can do what a resume and a LinkedIn profile can never do. Those two aspects of the job search toolkit have so much content in them. And you're asking the reader to be able to decipher everything that you have to say about your entire background. And now you, as the reader, have to translate, how does this person match up about this job that I'm trying to fill? But a cover letter, if it's written correctly, will do all that right for you. And that's the great power of it. And so when the question is asked, what's the most important part of the cover letter? Make sure that you identify in the job description what are the 3, maybe 4 most important requirements of the job, and match up something that you've achieved in your past that shows that you are a master of all 3 or 4 of those key requirements. Nobody's going to expect you to put together a list of 15. But if you just say, hey, here's 3 examples of things from my past that I've done that seem to align with 3 of your most important requirements of this job, you are now selling. You are now marketing your background and providing value for things that they say they need. And you can hit the ground running because you've just demonstrated to them something that you've achieved relative to each one of them that make you a favored candidate that they ought to give you an interview. This works. I've also developed an 1.5-hour webinar. The recording is available on the website on how to create highly customized cover letters in less than 15 minutes. The fact is, you want to be fast, because you got to write them quickly. You don't want to take a lot of time, but they have to be highly customized. And I've developed a technique whereby you can write highly customized cover letters where you get speed and customization highly overlapping with one another. And that's what enables it to be done in 15 minutes. So please, I urge you to check out, the 1.5-hour webinar recording that's on the site. And this is, to me, one of the most important and most overlooked aspects of the job search, because recent surveys show that 83% of hiring managers and recruiters like getting cover letters from candidates, because it enables them to very quickly see what the candidate has to sell. And it also talks about your ability to write. But only 38% of job seekers are writing them. All the more reason why you should be doing it. So I hope that helps. Here's another question. Obviously, I need the resume to beat the ATS session. Okay, glad to hear that. So I'll do that. I've been a freelance remote executive assistant and bookkeeper for over 5 years with older history in small to medium-sized companies. I don't have any big name companies in my history. Is there any hope for getting a position with a major employer? I'm looking for remote positions. There's nothing to say that if you spent, the entire career or bulk of your career working in mid-sized and smaller firms that you cannot work for a larger company. It's all about what you've done. It's all about your achievements, your accomplishments, and how you message, that you can take the things that you did, in this case as an administrator, and be able to translate that into a different environment. There are a lot of jobs, that don't require people to have worked in a Fortune 1000 company. In fact, very few you'll find tell you the size of the company they want you to have come from. But every job description will talk about the skills and achievements that they want serious candidates to possess. And so that's what you're really marketing yourself about. That's what you need to put into the cover letter. And that's what you need to exude in the ATS version of your resume, as well as the one you attach to an email when you send it out to other folks. So please don't think that if you've only worked in small and mid-sized companies, that there are not opportunities for in larger firms. Absolutely there are. In fact, a lot of large companies, and I've worked for quite a few of them in my past, but a lot of them want people with more entrepreneurial spirit. Well, you don't get a lot of that entrepreneurial spirit if you've grown up and spent your entire career working for a Fortune 1000 firm in the core parts of their business, because chances are your job in many cases has been somewhat narrow, very focused, and haven't given you the opportunities to wear many hats. But when you work in a smaller or mid-sized company, believe me, you wear a much bigger, broader range of responsibilities, and you wear a lot more hats. So that's a great asset. And so the individual who's asked this question, please use that to your advantage. Here's a question here. What are some of the tips for crafting an elevator pitch? Well, you've got to think, first at a high level. Okay. Up at the top, I want you to think about your branding statement. What is your branding statement? What is it that makes you unique and different than other people? So a branding statement is no different than a product slogan, a tagline, things like that. And so it's really important for you to start at that point. And then after that, you kind of branch off into some of the things that support that overall branding statement. It's important because people are going to ask you, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? And your elevator pitch is that 45-second response. And so talk about very specific things. Don't talk broadly. Don't talk about your loyalty, your dedication, your ability to collaborate, and your passion about the healthcare industry. Those things add virtually no value. You need to talk about more specific things. For a marketing person, for example, lead generation, product management, strategic planning, new product introductions, right? Marketing communications. These are harder hitting. And these are the kinds of keywords that are showing up in the jobs that you're probably interested in. So I urge you to take a look at that. I did have a few more questions that were emailed in. Here's a question about age discrimination. From a recent application, okay, with regard to age discrimination, how should we handle age bias when applying via the applicant tracking system? For example, the ATS requires dates when you went to college. All right, so I'm gonna give you sort of a two-part answer here. When it comes to answering the applicant tracking system and the forms and the fields that they require, you don't have much option, because in many cases they won't let you finish the form until you've completed all the fields. So in certain states, it's illegal to ask for somebody's college graduation date. Okay, the state of Illinois, I don't know if I'm not sure if they allow that, but they certainly don't allow you to ask for the person's salary from their previous job. So, but if it's a required field, it's going to be tough to get around it. But what I don't want you to do is think that the ATS is the only way into the company, because it's not. And this is where you've got to be able to get your email, that great cover letter email, out to several people in the sphere of influence. And quite honestly, I've coached many job seekers. They've been rejected by the applicant tracking system in 10, 15, 20 minutes, but have still been able to get them interviews because we send that great email cover letter with their resume to all of the right people. Not just one, not just HR, but to the potential hiring manager, their peers, and their boss. You just want to get the attention of these folks so that one of them does the right thing and sends it over to whoever's going to be doing the phone screens, or they send it over to the hiring manager whose attention you really want to get. And that's how you get interviews. So don't become slave to the applicant tracking system. You only empower those devices by giving them the power. And don't do that. There's no reason to. You hold that power. You determine who's going to see your resume. And quite honestly, on LinkedIn, you can find so many people. So, please take advantage of the platform. It's just tremendous from a research standpoint because it is just one enormous database, but it enables you to find all the right people. Here's a question, how can I pivot from into HR from customer service and beat ageism? So there's a couple questions in here. If you want to go from customer service into HR, making that transition will depend in part how many years of experience you have. Because if you're sitting on 15, 20 years of experience, it may be difficult to go into HR if what you want to do is to move into an HR role that may not be entry level. So folks in HR may look at you and go, even though you might be willing to start all over into a new career in the HR function, they may not be as receptive to you because you're going to be competing against folks, at least in my example, that might be 10, 15, or 20 years younger than you. And in many cases, a lot of companies like to groom younger people for the early stage roles. But if you are already early in your career and you want to move, from customer service into HR, it'll be much easier, much easier because you aren't competing with the age issue. It sounds like in this case you may be. So it could be a tough move, but you got to be able to identify skills that you had in this case in customer service that relate to the HR role that's of interest to you. You got to show transferability of those skills because if you don't have that, then in their mind you're starting from zero, and that's going to make it a whole lot tougher. So take a good inventory of what you've done in your past, and bring that to the forefront. So, age bias, yes, it's out there, no question. But I urge you to, don't let that stop you and don't let it become an excuse. All right, so here's a few more questions. I find that managing my time is a real challenge. Do you have any suggestions on how much time I should be spending on different activities? It does vary a little bit depending upon what you're trying to do, but my rule of thumb is never spend more than 15% of your job search time chasing after online ads. You can do that in 15% of your time or less. So the question then becomes, what are you doing with the other 85% of your time? Well, you should be researching target companies on LinkedIn. You should be crafting that email and sending it out to 5 or 6 people in every one of those firms. You need to be networking and looking at your network and using LinkedIn as a vehicle to determine who in my network can get me into these 25 companies I'm trying to break into. Then you want to connect with those folks via email and say, hey, you've got 3 people, 3 people that are in your network that I'd love to get introductions to, and make those requests, And chances are maybe you won't get all 3, but you might get 1 or 2 out of the 3. And now you've got somebody who can make that introduction, which makes the path into that company so much faster and so much easier. So I urge you to take advantage of that in large part for the bulk of the day. The 8 to 5 time is not for answering online ads. It's for everything else. And that's where networking, doing the researching, writing the messages that need to be sent out to all kinds of people that are going to potentially get you visibility, crafting, your messaging. And of course, you gotta get schooled on your interviewing skills. So if you've got an interview coming up, you got to spend that prep time and rehearse on Zoom and record yourself. Those are all easy tools and great ways to make yourself more prepared. Here's a question with regard to resumes. Are there certain parts of the resume that get read more than others? Yeah, there absolutely are. That very first part at the top, I refer to it as the branding statement and the value proposition. The value proposition is a paragraph. It's comprised of typically fragment sentences. There might be somewhere between 80 and 100 words in there, depending upon, the number of years of work experience you have. But it's got to summarize your background. That's a hot spot. You got to remember, the average resume only gets 6 to 10 seconds of read time. So there are not a lot of places that get read with with any kind of volume. So that top portion, extremely critical. Then the job titles. They're going to be looking at the companies and job titles before they even read on, in many cases, to the bullet points of your achievements. And you got to make sure that all those bullet points are written in an achievement or accomplishment fashion. Don't let your resume read like a job description. I had responsibility for this and this and this and this. As a hiring manager, I want to know, what did you do? And bullet points need to be written very carefully, because when you're talking about an achievement, you need to talk about what's the problem that I had to address, what are the actions I took, and what was the impact or results of my actions. And you got to be able to do that in 2 lines or less. This is the art of writing. I'm very critical when it comes to writing because I grew up as an advertising copywriter. And I know that every word counts. Every word counts in a cover letter. Every word counts in your resume and in your LinkedIn profile. The average reader, extremely lazy. I'm a great example of a lazy reader. This is why God invented the bullet point. It makes it much easier to read. So please make sure that you take that into account as you start to look over the resume that you've been using, and make sure it complies, with those kinds of rules. And of course, you've got to have a separate version of your resume, one for applicant tracking systems. So you have one that's the nice looking version of your resume that you attach to an email and send out to people you're networking with, to companies that you're sending directly to folks inside the firm. But you need to have an ATS compliant version of your resume that you can then upload onto online ads that do not allow you to upload a PDF. This will increase your chances of being read, because I've got 25 rules that your resume needs to comply with. Now, the fact is there's over 30 different ATSs out there. You never know which one is being, the reader of your resume. Some may be able to read color. Some can read hyperlinks. Some may be able to read underlines. But believe me, there are some out there that still to this day cannot. And because they exist, my feeling is create that version of your ATS that will comply with all of them. And that's why, I created that hour and a half session on how to build and create an ATS version of your resume. And of course, you saw the event is coming up again in a few weeks. So please, make sure that you've got 2 versions of your resume. Here's a question about interviewing. I've been asked to make a 30-minute presentation to a panel of interviewers, as I am now one of 2 finalists. This is great news. Any suggestions on how I can make the greatest impression? Here's the attitude I want you to consider as you start to prepare your presentation. The company has already decided you meet all the requirements of the job. It's just down to you and another person. At this point, it's about 2 things. Chemistry between you and the people that you're interviewing with, and they think you're going to fit into this company. That's really important. And likability is a part of that chemistry. And the second piece, in my mind, is really about being able to communicate well. Okay, they're testing your communication skills in that presentation because they're looking at you and they're judging you. Does he or she present well when given the opportunity to be in front of an audience, because good chance that this person is going to be presenting to folks inside the company. And this is the ultimate test. This is your greatest opportunity to impress upon them why you can hold your own, why you can hold your own in a meeting where you're presenting to a bunch of the hiring manager and their peers and their superiors. So please take it extremely seriously, because it's now down to just 2, maybe 3 of you. And this is absolutely critical. And I'll just add one more thing here. Companies hire at this point in terms of who is the least risky candidate. There are certain jobs where having that industry experience is important. But even above and beyond that industry experience, who is the least risky candidate here? Because the least risky candidate is likely to be one that can integrate into the organization quicker, be productive faster, and be able to, really master this job, in a very short period of time. Not having an industry fit oftentimes is the easiest way to eliminate highly qualified candidates. We know the best candidate does not always get the job, but the one that is the least risky candidate has now made it easier for the employer to say yes. And that's why I urge most of you, particularly if you've got 8 to 10 or more years of experience, start first with the industries where you've been, because you will always have a leg up over candidates who don't have that industry experience. Here's another question. How many pages should your resume have? No magic number, but I will say, if you can't say it within 3 pages, then you've been too wordy. And if you have more than 7 or 8 years of experience, you better be on page 2. Page 1 and 1-page resumes are folks that are just coming out of college or just have a couple years worth of experience. But if you've had achievements, chances are you're bleeding onto page 2 already. And by the way, for those of you that have been in the workforce for more than 25 years, there's nothing wrong with going all the way back to year 25. If those early stage parts of your career, if those jobs add value to your candidacy, eventually people find out your age. They'll figure it out. And so my feeling is, if you've had some great jobs where you did some fantastic things earlier in your career and they add value to your candidacy and potentially increase your chances, don't hide them because somebody said, don't ever go back more than 15 years. That's a big mistake. It really is. So I urge you got to get the content out there that adds value to your candidacy. Here's another question. What is the best resume format to use when you have an employment gap of several years? You're not alone. There are a lot of people that have had significant employment gaps, some because of COVID, but there's a whole separate camp of folks that have left the workforce either because they were let go and it's taken them longer to find their next opportunity. There are a lot of people that left the workforce to take care of their children for might be anywhere from 3 to 8 years. And there are folks that have also left the workforce because they've had a parent or parents that are not doing well and they've had to take care of them. You've got to be upfront with people and explain to them why, why that you've had that gap. But I urge you also, you've got to be able to also indicate what you've been doing during that time. And so it's always a good idea to get involved in other extracurricular activities, whether it's volunteering, providing some comfort to charitable causes, getting involved with your kids, if that's the case. So you've got to have some explanations that explain it. And it's important because you don't want people to just think you've been out of work, you've been looking for 4 years and you haven't found something. So, it's always good to have additional things going on so that you got to tell that story. And test that story with other folks, with a spouse, with other job seekers, with a friend, and see how they honestly give you candid feedback on how they think it will be received. Let me just share a couple quick things here with you before we part company. I do want to, remind you that I'm going to keep doing these Mondays with Marty every Monday from 12 to 12:30 Central Time. If you don't sign up, that's okay. You should be able to view this right on my LinkedIn profile at 12 o'clock Central Time. The next one's going to be not on May 2nd, on May 9th. Please feel free to email me any questions in advance. I always prioritize those, and you can always chat more questions in the chat box as we are going through the session. Lastly, I know that a lot of you are going through a very hard time. The job search is not easy, but you've got to be very proactive in your search. This is how you get interviews. This is what my what the hell approach to job search is all about, because you've got to take the attitude that what the hell do I have to lose by doing things that other job seekers aren't doing? Because this is a game about getting attention, being able to position, package yourself, but get the engagement with the audience you're trying to reach. And sometimes it means doing things that are off the traditional path. I've created 13 what the hell moves. I've got a great 3-hour workshop on that, but I urge you, don't be afraid to take chances. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to be bold. It makes you stand out, and it can make you outstanding. So again, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your participation in the group, and all the best with your job search.